So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Accounting for Sustainability International Case Competition information session. My name is Christoph Lee, and most of you know I'm an MBA student at the Rotman School of Management in Toronto, Canada, and one of the organizers of this case competition. I'm joined by Feng today, who is also an MBA student at the Rotman School of Management, and by Andrew Kornel, who is with CPA Canada and with A4S, and who will introduce Accounting for Sustainability and our sponsors in just a minute. But let's move on to what is actually the A4S ICC. The A4S ICC, it has been designed to connect the brightest financial, entrepreneurial, and technical student minds, which is you, of tomorrow with the business and executives who are shaping the world today, which is our panel of judges that consists of startup founders and C-suite executives of Canada's biggest institutional investors. Our vision for the competition is to provide a platform for students to develop creative solutions and ideas that could solve sustainability challenges and shape the businesses of the future. So let's move on to the history of this case competition. As you can see, this is already the 5th year we are hosting the A4S ICC. We've been around for almost half a decade. We started off in 2018 when the case challenge was to make cities more sustainable. The solutions by the winning team were about hempcrete, so basically a building material that combines hemp and concrete to build buildings. In 2019, the challenge was to find innovative technology to increase sustainability in general. And the solution was, again, by the winning team from the John Molson School of Business, to capture methane to produce electricity from that. In 2020, the challenge was to scale up sustainable finance. And the solution that was presented by the Rotman School of Management, who made the first place in this year, was an online platform for retail investors that enabled investment exclusively in sustainable businesses. Last year, 2021, or it's actually still this year, the challenge was to increase supply chain resilience in the light of the pandemic. And the winners were from the HEC Montreal, who proposed a digital marketplace to local fish ecosystems. So you see the A4S has a really wide and long history, but what I want to emphasize on this slide is really, as you can see, we are always stating the first and the second place. This is because, as you might know, that the first place of this competition gets 10,000 Canadian dollars, and the second place will receive 5,000 Canadian dollars. But besides the cash prize and, of course, the experience of teaming up with other people to build business solutions, I guess there's also another reason why teams participate and why people find this case comp appealing. So to explain that, let me tell you about the idea of the winning team of 2020. When they were brainstorming about their idea, they conducted user research, and they interviewed about 70 millennials across the globe to find out what holds people back to invest sustainably. They ideated and prototyped. They built a business model based on that extensive market research, and then they used this case comp to pressure test their startup idea. Not surprisingly, they made the first place and they won 10,000 Canadian dollars. But, and that's the important thing, they didn't stop there. They went on and asked one of the judges of our judging panel, who happened to be a startup founder himself, to mentor them. And they actually launched the idea. They launched the business. Today, 2 years later, their business is still around, though they made a few twists and tweaks to the business. But what is essential, they made their idea reality. as this anecdote from the winning team of 2020 shows, you never know where this case competition can lead you to. The key takeaway here really is, don't think of this case competition as a one-time event that ends after the case comp. Rather, think of it as a stage where you can try out and pressure test different ideas. And when it actually culminates in launching a business in one way or the other, that's great, because that means the case competition had real-world impact. So with that, let's move on to the actual agenda of today. What we're going to do is we're going to have some introductions about A4S, about our sponsors. We will introduce the case challenge. We will give you a rundown on the timeline and on the deliverables. And since both Rocky and I, we were participants in last year's case competition, we will share also some insider knowledge about what's important to basically perform in this case comp. We will also hear from, we'll also go through some advice from past teams, and in the end, we will conclude with a Q&A session. So whenever you have a question, please save it for later, save it for the Q&A, maybe jot it down on a notebook, and then once we open up the Q&A, we'll get to your questions. But for now, let's hear from Andrew about A4S and our sponsors. And Andrew, I pass it on to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. And hello, everybody. As Chris mentioned, my name is Andrew Kornel, and I'm the chapter project manager for the Canadian chapter of the A4S CFO Leadership Network, also an employee of CPA Canada, and really excited to tell you a little bit about A4S, what some of the work we do and who we work with, as well as a little bit about the sponsors before passing it back to Chris to get into more of the details. So first, a bit about A4S. A4S was Accounting for Sustainability was launched by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales in 2004 to transform finance to make sustainable business as usual. And one quote that I think summarizes this purpose is to help ensure that we are not battling to meet 21st century challenges with, at best, 20th century decision-making and reporting systems. I think we know for any organization, the finance team controls the purse strings and any major decision runs through that team. So it's really important that, that the finance team and the CFO and their groups are equipped to be able to integrate sustainability into decision-making. So specifically, A4S has three main aims. One is to transform financial decision-making. The second is to inspire finance leaders. And third is to scale up action. So how are those aims applied, and who are the key audiences? A4S has 5 key audience groups: chief financial officers and their finance teams, the global accounting community, investors, capital markets, and the wider finance community, governments, regulators, and policymakers, and most relevant for this group are business schools and academia. So with those audiences, I think it's then important to realize and understand how those groups are engaged. So first, we'll start with the Accounting Bodies Network and the global accounting community. The Accounting Bodies Network is a group of global accounting bodies representing over, I think it's 2.3 million accountants worldwide. And just recently, there was an announcement for a commitment within those organizations, 13 of those global bodies, to have a commitment for net zero carbon emissions through their own operations, as well as creating guidance and help for their professional accounting members to be able to do this within their roles as well. Next of importance is the Asset Owners Network, which is a group of pension chairs from UK pension schemes who, again, are committed to having their pension funds and pension schemes integrating sustainability and offering sustainable solutions to their members. A recent addition, and just this coming November, December, is the A4S Academy. And this is a CFO sponsored program for training and development, which is for senior finance leaders to be able to work with peers engage with peers from across the globe and build implementation plans and develop case studies about how they have integrated sustainability within their organizations. This year is exciting because this is the first cohort that will be graduating the full academy, and there will be more information about that through some of the social media channels and the build up to the annual A4S Summit. Bringing it back to the chief financial officers and the finance teams is we have the CFO Leadership Network. The CFO Leadership Network was first launched in Europe with the European chapter, and then in Canada in 2017. We're coming up on our 5th anniversary, which is something we're really excited about. It's been a good 5 years, and we're looking forward to many more. Now, the third chapter is the US chapter, which launched, I believe, in 2018 or 2019. And that is a group of large US organizations who are, again, committed to, from an organizational level of their CFOs have a commitment to integrate sustainability within the organization, as well as they have a personal commitment. So for membership, it's really important that there's a matching of what the organization is committing to and what the individual is committed to, and matching up that passion to bring it to the CFO Leadership Network. It is important to know that many of these members have made net zero commitments to either be net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. So on the next slide, we have the sponsors, which are members and partners of the Canadian chapter of the CFO Leadership Network. So you can see their logos here, and I think it's important to identify that the 3 organizations, Brookfield Asset Management, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, and CPA Canada, have had a long history dating back decades of integrating the purpose, the sustainability into the purpose of their organizations, whether it be through their investments and their operations or through education, thought leadership, and guidance for members. All 3 of these organizations can be considered global leaders in sustainability. We're fortunate to have these sponsors because they do provide some very interesting, first of all, perspectives throughout the judging process. But as we get to the final round of the competition, they also provide representatives. So whether that be, we're lucky this year to have Tim Deacon, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, and I believe Brian Lawson, Vice Chair of Brookfield Asset Management, in addition to Jessica Fries. So we'll have, if you're lucky and fortunate enough to make it with your idea through to the final round, you can be sure to have some experts and really real definitive leaders in this space, challenging your ideas and making sure that it's going to meet the mark, which Chris will talk a little bit about in a second. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention how this is, as you've all, I'm assuming you're all aware that this is a very important time and with a very key UN Conference of the Parties COP26 meetings happening in roughly about 10-ish days. We know there's going to be a lot of focus on net zero and the race to zero, as I believe it's being called, but also from an accounting perspective, the IFRS Foundation is expected to announce more formally what the International Sustainability Standards Board will look like and where it might be located. So keep an eye for more information on that. And before I pass it over to Chris, get into the details, as you're building your submission for this case competition and thinking about how you can prove and demonstrate sustainability integration throughout, be sure to visit the A4S Knowledge Hub, where we have lots of essential guides, whether that be integrating climate change into valuations, debt finance, CapEx, social and human capital, and just next week, keep an eye out for our Engaging the Board and Executive Management Guide. So these are all guides that are written for finance, by finance, and developed by members of the sponsors here as well. So with that, just really excited for this 5th year. And then Chris will tell you a little bit more about the details of this year's competition. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We're now coming to the case topic of this year's competition. And as Andrew already mentioned, we are in the middle of a climate crisis. In 2015, the UN Paris Agreement set out a clear goal, which was to keep global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius by 2100, and to strive for a maximum rise in global average temperatures of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, 6 years later, we look back on that agreement, and we all have to admit we are not on track to deliver this goal. The clock is ticking. As a result of the 2015 UN Paris Agreement, many governments across the globe made pledges, plans, and commitments to shift their economies to having net zero carbon emissions until 2050. But how will the road to net zero economies specifically look like? some critics claim that many countries do not have a feasible roadmap to get to net zero. I remember reading news when the newly elected US President Joe Biden revealed his roadmap to net zero for the United States. Many critics actually responded that the plan relies partly on magic. So how can we create feasible roadmaps to net zero that at the same time create positive social impact and a just transition? This is where our case topic comes in. We challenge you to design actionable, measurable, commercial business and financial models that reduce greenhouse gas emissions with sustainability at the core of its business strategy. And before we move on to the details of how you can tackle this challenge, let's first look at the overall timeline of this case competition. So today, here we are. It's October 22nd. We are in one of the two information sessions that we will hold. But overall, the case comp is really structured into 3 phases. So we have the assessment phase, we have the semifinals, and we have the finals. The assessment phase, the first phase, basically starts on November 1st and will close on January the 14th. This is where there will be some deliverables due if you plan to participate in this case comp. And when you basically submit your deliverables, you are at the same time also registered as a participating team for this case comp. The semifinals will take place next year, March 7th to March 14th. So it's basically 1 week. And then the finals will take place on March 25th and March 26th. So March 25th is basically a kind of like a front runner event to the finals, where we will offer every participating semifinalist team a live networking session with our judges. Andrew already told you those judges are C-suite executives from our sponsors, but also startup founders. And the finals basically will be the top 3 teams of this case competition, pitching their ideas against each other, and then at the end we'll know who the winning team and who the runner-up is. Before we move on, just one thing about the assessment phase. As you can see, it starts November 1st and ends January 14th, which means it's 2.5 months long, and it's quite a long time. So if you are interested to participate, you plan to participate, you should make a timeline when you will work on the case comp and when not. As you're all either university or business students, you will have a lot of deliverables for schoolwork along the way. So to stay really focused for 2.5 months, you need a plan. But we'll come back to that later when we reveal some of the tips. So with that, let's move on to the deliverables of the first phase of the assessment phase. Basically, this is what we are asking from you until January the 14th next year. There are 3 deliverables. The first is an executive summary. The second is a 5-minute video pitch. And the third is a concept form for it. We'll dive into them, into all of these 3 items into more detail. The executive summary basically consists of 3 pages. We want from you a title page where you basically share like very basic information. What's your team name? How many team members? What is the school that you are applying from? The second, and that is basically the core, the heart of the executive summary, is the summary of your idea / solution. And the third page is a team outline. So you can have up to 5 team members on the team, and you basically explain We basically want from you to explain why are you best fitted for this case competition. The executive summary, so as you see, we just want one single page. It's just an A4 format, which is little space, right? It's not a lot of space to basically lay out a whole business idea that contributes to a net zero society. So you really have to start early thinking about what is it, what our solution, what kind of problem will our solution tackle? How will we build a business model on this solution, on this problem? And how are we gonna present it? How are we gonna pitch it in this on this one page? In addition to that, and this is new for this year's case comp, we didn't have that in the last 4 years, is we also require participants to submit a 5-minute video pitch. Why? Basically, as I said, one page is usually not enough to convey the whole idea. So use the video pitch to complement your executive summary, and you can use it to convey any other facts, concepts, arguments, and models that did not fit into the executive summary and that you think is crucial to basically get your idea across and sell it. And since all these video pitches from all the teams that participate in the assessment phase will be uploaded onto the A4S YouTube page, so we're trying to create a kind of platform where everyone can watch the other team's ideas. We also require you to submit a consent form for your video pitch. This form can be found in the student handbook, and also the executive summary in the 5-minute video pitch. That there are more details to how to approach writing the executive summary, how to film the 5-minute video pitch in the student handbook, which is available on the A4S ICC.com website. I will talk more about the student handbook later when we get to the insider tips. For now, let's move on to the next slide, which is also quite important, the judging criteria. So it's always important for a case comp to know on what criteria and what dimensions you will be assessed on, right? Basically, we have 8 criteria. First and foremost is linked to the case topic. That means your solution, your proposal should really be linked to achieving a net zero society in a specific country or political administration or whatever. If we see that there is not really a link to the case topic, then your team will be disqualified. So this is really a knockout criterion. The second one is financial viability. So you should show at some point in your pitch that your business is actually financially viable, but also viable from a business side. So it can basically thrive in the competitive environment or in the economy that you plan to propose your solution in. The fourth is you have to outline the business value and the growth opportunity. So you really have to make sure that we understand and as judges understand what is the value proposition, what value does your business idea create, and how and basically how do you persuade us that that growth is possible. The fifth one is model uniqueness. So we reward innovative ideas, we reward innovative solutions, and if they are not copy pasted from an already existing solution, the better. But please do keep in mind that it has to be feasible. So you can of course come with like a very disruptive idea, but at the same time it has to be feasible. If you think about it, what I told you before, in the end you should be able to to carry out your plan and basically launch this idea. The sixth criterion is the environmental and/or social impact. So also linked to the first one, we really want to show you, and when you read the case topic in further detail on the website, you will see that we actually want you to map your business idea and the impact that your business idea has onto the UN Sustainable Development Goals, right? Which of the Sustainable Development Goals are both positively and negatively impacted? There will be certainly positive impacts, but if you think of it, every business idea, every business decision comes with a trade-off. So if you pitch the idea and you just show us what's great, what's awesome, what's positive about it, that's great. But we also want to hear, what are the risks? What is it? What can be actually really, really detrimental when you carry out this idea? And we want to hear about it, and we want to hear how you manage it, how you manage it, how you manage the risk. What are kind of like the counter ideas that you have in place to deal with the negative impacts on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The seventh criterion, supporting data. As I mentioned before, we don't want your idea to be rooted or based on magic. We want to see facts. We want to see supporting data, so market research and so on. And last but not least, your presentation, both the executive summary and also the video pitch or the live presentations when you move on to subsequent rounds, should be professional, and also your defense of the proposal should be professional. So with the judging criteria in mind, I will also note that you don't have to screenshot this, you don't have to memorize it here or write it down. You will find these judging criteria in the judging rubric, and the judging rubric is also part of the student handbook that you can find on the website. So with that being said, let's move on to the deliverables for the semifinals. Again, for you, the most important thing now is what are the deliverables for the assessment phase and the judging criteria, but still we want to give you kind of like a flavor of what will await you if you make it into the semifinals. Again, semifinals next year, March 7th to March 14th. Basically, what you will have to deliver is a 10-minute live virtual presentation. So what happens after the assessment phase, we will have a look at your executive summaries. So with we, I mean the judges and us, the project team. We'll have a look at the executive summaries. We'll have a look at your video pitches, and the judges will provide feedback in terms of not only in terms of how you can better pitch your idea, but also we'll also get into the nitty-gritty details of your business model and your viability and so on. So you will receive feedback, and we expect that you use that feedback to fine-tune your presentation, to fine-tune your business idea. And then if you're selected for the semifinal, you will have the opportunity to pitch your idea within 10 minutes during the semifinals. You will again receive feedback during the semifinals, during a Q&A session. So we will hold a 15-minute Q&A session for the semifinals, for each semifinals team, because we also want to see how you defend your business model, right? Those are the judges are basically an investing community, and if you've ever watched Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, you have to know how to defend your business idea if you pitch them. So this is also what we care about, and it's also part of the judging criteria. How well can you defend this business idea? Let's move on to the next slide, which is basically the deliverables for the finals. Again, I'll briefly touch on it. It's not important for you now, but to give a flavor of what the finals are like. During the semifinals, we will figure out who the top 3 performing teams are, and then those top three performing teams will give a 15-minute live virtual presentation on March 26th, where we also want to have the financial model for the business, either available in the main deck or as an appendix. And there will be, again, a 10-minute Q&A session for each of those 3 teams. So now, as you know, what kind of deliverables in this case competition is involved, it sounds a lot. In the end, I can tell you, I can assure you, you're always working on the same pitch, on the same business idea. You're just fine-tuning, you're iterating it, right? So it's not as much as it actually sounds like on the slides. But let's shift gears and let's share some insider tricks and tips. So what's important? What's important for this case? I think from Rocky's and my experience, there are really 3 things that participating teams should keep in mind. The first is, I already touched on this, is plan ahead for the assessment phase. Note that the assessment phase is 2.5 months long, which is an extraordinarily long time for a case competition. And we really urge you to decide with your team when you will work on the topic and when you will not. You should really define a process for how long will you ideate, right? Well, at the beginning, you usually start with an ideation phase, like what kind of problems could we tackle? Think about, will you do any interviews with potential users of your business idea? When do you start with the solutioning phase? When will you write your executive summary, and when will you film the video clip? Really structure the assessment phase into work streams and decide when you work on which work stream. The second piece of advice is for your video pitch. Think about who your audience is, and it sounds very simple, but it has a strong impact when it comes to your idea and how it's being judged. Keep in mind that you're pitching to an investment community. You're pitching to C-suite members of Canada's institutional investors. You're pitching to startup founders. So think about this as you would pitch a startup idea to receive seed funding. And the third piece of advice is really make use of all the resources available on the A4S ICC.com website. So we can share the link in the chat as well. But basically, if you go to the A4S ICC.com website, you click on the resources tab, you can find a lot of resources that Andrew mentioned, but also you can find the student handbook there. And as I said, the student handbook contains all relevant information about the assessment phase deliverables, how you can build your proposal, how you can craft a storyboard, and also there are a few tips and tricks how you can film an appealing 5-minute video pitch. So with that, with these 3 pieces of advice, let's move on and let's have a look at what past teams have to say about their learnings. Again, this is the 5th year, so what have teams in the past experienced? What is valuable? Basically, the first advice here is research your business model extensively. The judges are very knowledgeable, and they will quiz you on different risks. They're very knowledgeable from a finance perspective. So really make sure that your financial model is waterproof. Really think about, since we're talking about delivering a net zero society, you will have to think about how will your idea decrease greenhouse gas emissions, right? And there are 3 types of greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So how does your ideas play into reducing greenhouse gas emissions across these 3 scopes? Also, make sure your financial model is well explained. As I just mentioned, they will judge you on the sustainability of these financial models thoroughly. And third, and this is something that I want to stress specifically because this is an international case competition, try to build a diverse team with different perspectives. So in the past, there was a team where the members had different experiences across the board. One was from steel manufacturing, oil and gas, social impact, investment banking. The more diverse, the easier it will be to craft innovative solutions because you will bring more cognitive diversity to the table. And I want to stress this point because since this is an international case competition, you can basically mix and mingle teams from different schools and countries. So the team that you build doesn't have to be from the same school or the same country. You can build a global team if you can manage the time zone differences. But this is just one thing that I wanted to stress here. So with this advice, I want to conclude with a big thank you. Thank you for your interest in this case competition. If the A4S ICC caught your attention and you are planning to participate, please register for the assessment phase on a4sicc.com, so the website shown at the very bottom of this slide. We will also paste the link into the chat. And also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And with that being said, let's open up the Q&A session. We will take your questions now. Yes, Usama.
So thank you for this session. Firstly, it's been very helpful. I had a few questions. I'll just take it step by step. Does the whatever business you come up with, does it have to be something that's never been implemented before? Can we take inspiration from existing businesses or existing ideas and tweak around? Or does it have to be something that we've thought from scratch, something that doesn't exist right now?
So yes, you can certainly build on something. You can certainly take an existing concept and tweak it, right? You could, what we usually recommend, and you will also read this when you go through the student handbook, we would recommend you to focus on one industry. So pick an industry of your choice and then think about a solution that can decrease greenhouse gases with a high impact and contribute to net zero. And of course, you could say, okay, let's take a business idea from industry A but which does not exist in industry B, and let's think about how we can take the idea and basically transfer it into industry B. What kind of friction points do we have to solve and so on, and what is the actual impact? So you can certainly play with that. You can definitely get inspired by existing solutions. You can of course also visit the website. I think there was a question in the chat which fits here very well. Are past submissions and videos available? Yes, they are. So you can also get inspired by those. Definitely.
Can I go ahead with another question if nobody else is going to ask?
Sure, you can definitely
Okay.
ask a follow-up question.
All right. So since this is an international competition, I just wanted to confirm that the business model essentially, does it have to be compatible or viable in a specific market, like within the Canadian market? Or can it be something that we implemented in another continent altogether, something that's viable over there, but might not be over here?
Yes, very good question. That's a good question. Because you can be very free in terms of what industry and also what country you're targeting with your solutions. So since, I mean, I just recognize a lot of people who are participating in this info session. They're from the Rotman School of Management located in Canada. But your solution that you're crafting, it doesn't have to be targeted towards the Canadian economy. It can be, if you can basically take any industry in any country and try to think about how you can contribute to deliver a net zero society. You should, of course, keep in mind that if you decide to implement your solution in a different country, you should know about the local regulations, the local market, because you will have to still persuade the judges that your business is viable and feasible in this country. I hope that answers your question, Usama. Great. So I just saw that there is another question in the chat. Are we allowed to use secondary data, or does it need to be from primary sources? So maybe Shahira, could you elaborate on that? I think I understand the question, but just wanted to yes, to see that I got it right. Please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I had some issues with unmuting myself.
No worries.
Basically, you had referenced that the team that won from Rotman before had actually done their own consumer research and testing. So that's what I wanted to ask, like, are we submitting our survey results, for instance, interview results, or can we reference secondary research as well?
Yes, also very good question. Thank you for asking this. So yeah, I don't want to, I hope the anecdote that I told you didn't leave the false impression that you will all have to do user interviews and that you all have to basically find 70 people to ask them about your product. No, you don't have to do this. This team chose to do that because their solution was a retail online investment platform for retail investors, basically people like you and me. And it's most easiest to test your solution if you have like a group of people who would be interested in it, right? Like business students, you can just ask them and you know, what are their pain points? But you don't have to do that. Your solution could be, it couldn't be, you know, your business idea could be not a business to customer, but a business to business idea. And then it would be hard to do market research, right? To reach out to companies just for this case competition. So you don't have to worry that there will be any, you know, subtraction of points if you use secondary data or secondary sources. You can just use like industry reports and everything that you can basically find in the databases of your respective business school or university. So you don't have to go through a process of doing user interviews. Does that answer your question? Okay, great, perfect. So we have another question in the chat from Eduardo, which is about, can you choose your own team? Yes. So regarding team formation, you are completely free in terms of who and how you're going to team up with your team. The only restrictions that we give you is your team can only be 5 people maximum. So of course you could do this case competition with 2 people only. I would not recommend it because the more people, the more brain power you will have, and generally the more resources you will have, and the more innovative your ideas will be. So I would recommend trying to find 5 diverse people that you would like to or for from your individual point of view, for people that you would like to partner up with and basically journey through this case comp. Does that answer your question, Eduardo? Okay, great. And then there is another question from James, which is about, can ideas for the case be a not-for-profit solution, or does it have to be a for-profit business case? Yes. Also a great question. We are working in the, it's a case comp that is targeted toward students who are interested in sustainability, social impact. But for this case comp, we definitely want to see a for-profit solution, a for-profit business case, and that is because you basically will have to show how the business scales, right? You will have to show how you make revenue, how you throw a profit, how you use that profit to invest into the growth of your company. So even though it is a for-profit business case, you should not forget the link to sustainability and to net zero. But a not-for-profit solution is in most of the cases difficult to scale. So that's why, yes, it has to be a for-profit business case, business solution. Does that answer your question? Great. Okay, there is a question from Mariana. Our team members are from different Mexican states. Can we focus the business model in 2 states or only in 1? Could you also please elaborate a little bit on it, just so that I have a bit more context, Mariana, if that works? So I think you're currently typing in the chat the context, but I will give my you've just posted. So we live in different parts of Mexico, some in the capital and one near the beach. Of course. So when I said focus on one industry and one location, it doesn't, of course, have to be one, location is not defined so narrowly that it's only like a kind of like a political region or a province. It can be, oftentimes it's easy to find a national solution in terms of, because in terms of greenhouse gas regulations, it's sometimes easier to try and figure out a solution for a specific country, for a specific nation, because each nation has different greenhouse gas basically commitments in terms of when and how much they try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So in your case, it's perfectly it's perfectly fine if you do that. You can definitely focus the business model in 2 states. It can also be, so in the end, we just want you to take, to keep in mind that wherever you implement this solution, you have to be aware about the local regulations. So you can also say, I have our solution targets North America, so Canada, the States, and Mexico, right? That is also possible if you show that you understand where the economy is currently heading in terms of greenhouse gas commitments, and that's no problem at all. It can also be a global solution, but of course, it's always, if you try and make your solution global, it can be tricky because you will lose focus, and it might dilute the impact in terms of explaining and persuading people from your solution. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. And then we have another question from Paras. What should be more important? Potential for disrupting an industry or initial scale? For example, a solution may be very small scale initially, probably serving a neighborhood or a few blocks, but can be potentially scaled later on. Yes. Also great question. So I would say, in terms of initial scale and potential for disrupting an industry, certainly disrupting an industry, but I have to say, in addition to initial scale, so initial scale is not as important. You can start, when I refer back to the example of the 2020 team, they started with 70 people, right? They built this platform, and then they basically sent a trial version to those 70 people, and that was like their first customers. So this is a very small scale. But what I want to add to this thought of potential of disruption versus initial scale, you have to show that the business can grow. You have to not only show that it's feasible, so that you actually can throw a profit, and that you can make money, but it's also about how and are you able to grow? Can you scale the business? Scalability is really, really important for this case competition. And you will have to think about how you will achieve scalability and how you will scale. Is it, are you gonna, you certainly will have to form partnerships, right? You have to think about what is the ecosystem where you put your solution in. Who could be potential partners? Is it big corporations who might be interested in doing a partnership with you because you help them cutting down on CO2, or is it universities because you are pursuing a kind of like a commercialization of technology project? So you really have to think about the scalability aspect as well. Did that answer your question? Okay, great. Okay, Usama, you have another question.
Yeah, so it said in the presentation that the solution needs to be net zero. So I just want to confirm, does it have to be strictly net zero, or can it also be a business which is simply a reduction of emissions, but not to an extent where we can call it a net zero organization?
Mm-hmm. Yes, also good question. Of course, it's an interesting question because, we are basically giving you the opportunity to think about a new business, which of course a new business always produces scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions. But with net zero here, we really mean net zero in terms of the sum of all global greenhouse gas emissions within the province or country or continent that you're targeting. So you can think of it as, let's for example take let's take an example of your I'm just making this up on the spot, but let's say your business idea is a company, maybe like a platform that allows other companies to save greenhouse gas emissions by analyzing their processes. I don't know, let's say for the steel industry, and this company analyzes processes in the steel industry. So this company will certainly have CO2 emissions, right? Because they will have a headquarter, they have to buy energy, which is, scope 2 emissions. So the company itself doesn't have to be net zero in terms of, the kind of like their own operations, but overall, they should contribute to decreasing greenhouse gas emissions in the country where you want to implement it. So, or in the industry where you want to implement it. So let's say for steel, for this example that I just made up, it could be that, I don't know, after year 5, you have partnered up with the 10 biggest steel manufacturing companies across the globe, and you were able to decrease their greenhouse gas emissions by, let's say, 20%, right? So by that you can infer how much greenhouse gas emissions you would save our planet in the next 30 to 40 years, right? So think of it from that point of view. Does it answer your question? Do you have a follow-up, or is this a residual hand, Usama? Okay, I guess it was a residual hand. Okay, great. Then there is one other question from Helen, which is about, can it be a proposal for existing businesses, organizations to expand or innovate, or does it have to be a business of our own? It's a good question. You can certainly, so I wouldn't rule out the first, it can be, I think it can be a proposal for an existing business, but it should not be an isolated project that you could only launch within that business. So let's say, I don't know, let's say your proposal for an existing business would be Amazon, right? Amazon has a lot of data. They probably have a lot of opportunities to find ways how to decrease greenhouse gas emissions, right? But within this case competition, you can't say, we will just, we are Amazon and we are just branching off this spin-off, which is, let's call it Amazon Green. And Amazon Green will basically, use the user data of all the Amazon clients around the world to try and decrease greenhouse gas emissions by whatever idea that you have come up with. So this is not possible, because it basically depends on the assumption that you would have total control over Amazon, right? And that Amazon actually would allow you to do that. So it's kind of difficult to prove that your idea is feasible, because you would be, you would basically need to have all the data that Amazon has. So this doesn't work. What works though is you can think about what existing businesses and organizations do, especially in the field of net zero. So there's a lot of resources on the A4S ICC.com website. You can have a look at them and think about what they do, get inspired. And then you can take this idea and spin it, tweak it, and twist it so that you have a business idea on your own that you try to scale from scratch. So any business that are executable and feasible by the capability of the team. Yes, exactly. So as long as it's feasible to do so and executable, yes, you can start with an existing business. But of course, think about the feasibility aspect. That's really important. You shouldn't make any assumptions that are really difficult to really difficult to hold, right? Don't base your business model on magic. It should really be grounded in facts, and it of course, you will always need imagination, because if you envision a way, if you envision a company, a startup, there always has to be an element of imagination, but it should still be executable. Okay, great. So, are there any other questions? If not, you can, of course, so if you decide to participate in this CaseCon, you can, of course, always email us, the project team. So either you email us on our Rotman email addresses if you know them, or you just go to the website. It's also displayed here again, the A4S ICC at rotman.utoronto.ca. You can always shoot us a question if you have a question regarding your you know, if that is allowed or not. Yes, Mariana. So we can the email, you can find it currently on the slide. It's in the third line. We can also paste it in the chat, of course. And you can also find it on the website. So when you go, you will anyways have to go to the A4SICC.com website. Basically on the very last line displayed on the slide, you will have to go to this website, because you have to look up, you know, you have to reread the case topic. You have to look again at the judging criteria to make sure that your business idea fits all these criteria. And you will also find this email address on the website. Rocky just pasted it in the chat. Thank you, Rocky. So please feel free to shoot us an email for any questions. And with that, I want to conclude the Q&A session, wrap it up, and again, say thank you for your interest and for your participation. We will be in touch soon. We are planning to have regular communication updates. As you know, the assessment phase is 2.5 months long, so we are trying to keep you engaged by having communication updates throughout the timeline, throughout mid of January, when the assessment phase will close. So keep an eye on that. Follow us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. And again, if you have any questions, reach out. With that, I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we're looking forward to your ideas, to your business models, and to your video pitches. Have a great evening. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.